The year was 1876. In the vast plains of Montana, one of the most shocking and legendary battles in American history was about to unfold. The Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand, was a fight between the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry and a coalition of Lakota, Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. It was a battle of defiance, bravery, and strategy, where Native American forces dealt a stunning defeat to the U.S. military. Native resistance via U.S. expansion. The roots of this battle ran deep. In the late 19th century, westward expansion was pushing settlers in the U.S. military into Native American lands, violating past treaties. The Black Hills of South Dakota, sacred to the Lakota Sioux, had been promised to them in the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868. However, the U.S. government demanded that the native tribes move onto reservations, but many refused, choosing instead to defend their way of life. Led by great leaders like Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall, thousands of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors gathered along the Little Bighorn River. They were ready to resist, and when the U.S. Army sent forces to force them onto reservations, the stage was set for one of the most famous battles in American history. Custer's fatal mistake. In June 1876, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led the 7th Cavalry into the region, eager to strike what he believed would be a decisive blow against the native forces. But Custer underestimated the strength and numbers of the warriors. Reports suggested there were around 800 warriors, but in reality more than 2,000 native fighters were prepared for battle. The battle unfolded as Custer and his 210 men rode toward the massive Lakota and Cheyenne encampment. They were met with an unexpected and overwhelming force. Warriors on horseback surged toward them, arrows and bullets filling the air. Custer had expected to surprise the native forces, but it was he who was caught off guard. The battle quickly turned into a desperate struggle for survival. Custer's men dismounted and tried to form defensive positions on a series of ridges and hills, but the open terrain provided little cover. The native warriors, led by Crazy Horse and Gall, used their superior numbers and knowledge of the land to encircle and isolate Custer's forces. The chaos of battle, the fight became a ferocious hand-to-hand struggle. Warriors armed with rifles, tomahawks, and bows charged in waves, cutting down cavalrymen before they could reload their weapons. Many of Custer's soldiers, realizing they were outnumbered and doomed, shot their own horses to create makeshift barricades. But it was not enough. Eyewitness native accounts describe how Crazy Horse fearlessly led the charge, riding directly into the gunfire, weaving through bullets as if untouched by death. His warriors followed, firing deadly volleys before closing in with spears and clubs. Custer, still believing reinforcements might arrive, ordered his men to hold their ground, but communication between his scattered units had completely collapsed. Some soldiers tried to break through the encirclement, only to be cut down in the attempt. Others fought until they ran out of ammunition, resorting to using rifle butts and knives in a final stand. The last stand, Custer falls. As the fighting reached its final moments, Custer and the remaining survivors of his unit were forced onto a small ridge, now known as Last Stand Hill. With warriors closing in from all sides, they fired their last rounds. But the sheer number of attackers was overwhelming. Accounts say that Custer was one of the last to fall, though whether he was killed by an enemy warrior or took his own life remains debated. Within an hour, every single soldier under Custer's direct command lay dead. The bodies of the fallen were stripped, scalped, and in some cases mutilated, a common practice in warfare at the time, meant to ensure a warrior's spirit would not return for revenge. Reno and Benteen's fight for survival while Custer's force was annihilated. Major Marcus Reno and Captain Frederick Benteen were engaged in a desperate battle of their own. Ordered to attack from the other side, Reno and his men were quickly overwhelmed and forced to retreat into a wooded area near the river. Under relentless attack, they dug in, using dead horses as cover, and barely managed to hold their position. Benteen, sent to reinforce Reno, arrived in time to prevent complete disaster. The two forces combined, forming a defensive perimeter on a hill where they held off repeated attacks for nearly 2 full days. Running low on water and supplies, they prepared for the worst until, finally, the native forces withdrew. The reason? The warriors had achieved a decisive victory against Custer and saw no need to risk further losses. Many also needed to protect their families and move their encampment, knowing U.S. reinforcements would soon arrive. A battle that echoed through history, the Battle of Little Bighorn was one of the most significant Native American victories in history, but it came at a cost. Though they had humiliated the U.S. Army, the retaliation that followed would be devastating. Within months, the U.S. military launched a relentless campaign that hunted down and forced many Native groups onto reservations, ending the era of Native resistance. But on that fateful day in June 1876, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho had won a battle that would never be forgotten, one that proved the courage, resilience, and strength of their people. What do you think was the most important lesson from the Battle of Little Bighorn? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more legendary historical events.